is this generation different in terms of how much we give to other people in terms of our information?
Well, I think this generation has a sense that information wants to be free and information about themselves wants to be free. And in a way, there's a kind of self-surveillance that I think that young people don't think about in political terms. But it is a political issue. People put their lives on the screen. They put really intimate details of their lives out there, and with very little thought that there might be people using that information in ways that are not benign.
Technology has completely altered the nature, quality, and quantity of our social interactions. Never before in the history of mankind have we been this exposed to so much personal information about our friends, family, acquaintances, and even strangers. Our digital identity is arguably more important than our physical one, because that's what we're being judged on first. So the social media wave has submerged 2 billion people globally. It's opened up communication channels, aided discovery, education. On average, a person has 5 social media accounts, and they roughly spend 1 hour and 40 minutes browsing these networks every single day.
We don't even realize what a big chunk of our day we spend on our phones.
So along with this huge growth in tech, we've also seen another acceleration: a rise in mental health problems. The most socially connected generation, millennials, according to the American Psychological Association, are said to be the most stressed out generation. New York Magazine stated that anxiety in young people was at an 80-year high. The front of the Times newspaper in the UK a few weeks back stated teenagers were in a depression epidemic. The Independent said teenage depression has risen 70% in the past 25 years. Eating disorders has increased, has doubled even in the past 7 years.
When you get a text on your phone, it vibrates, get a notification, you get a bit excited, don't you? That momentary happiness. You're excited to see who it is, a little curious. That's dopamine being released in your brain. Dopamine, by the way, is the exact same chemical that's released when you drink alcohol, smoke a cigarette, take drugs, gamble. We've noticed that the average attention span of a human being has now gone down to 9 seconds.
I'm fat. Wow, I'm fat. She's only 19 years old? What am I doing with my life? Hey, 2 likes, nice. Do I like this photo? Does she really need more likes? Hey, I hope I'm gonna be invited to the wedding. What, 1 more like, nice. Welcome to the internal monologue of a typical social media scroll. A monologue that so many of us have every day, but we don't think about, we don't talk about it. In fact, many of us can't even recognize it happening.
I think the web's about a lot of things. The web is about, it's connecting humanity. All right, the web is humanity connected. That includes a lot of things, and friends is one of them. I think the social networking systems we have at the moment are, in a way, in their infancy. Typically, they allow you to deal with the concept of a friend and a photograph, and whether a friend is in a photo, and where I'm going. But in fact, my life is much more complex than just having a set of friends. I have all kinds of groups.
Do you think that generations growing up, the new generation growing up with the web, think differently from other generations?
Well, it's clear that even people who have, like me, who started off without the web and now use it, work differently. When we want to think of something, we tend to often just reach for the keyboard because we have assumed that we can find stuff. Now, people say, I don't know, but that they've measured that people are not remembering so much. I don't know, but I know that the way I work very often assumes that I can go for my computer helper, for my web as a helper. The web is extension of my brain. When I'm roaming, so my little interface to the web is too expensive to use, I feel as though suddenly I've got one hand turned behind my back because the usual sort of instinctive reaction to whip it out is I have to hold back and try to actually think things out.
I think that it's hard to teach the relationship between privacy and democracy, and it's also hard to teach the relationship between intimacy and privacy. You know, what is intimacy without privacy? I think this is really a question for this generation.
What's interesting is that
I honestly believe that if you were to go back into the 1920s and take an ordinary, semi-educated 15-year-old and place him next to an ordinary, semi-educated 15-year-old now, you would find the one now knows more, understands more, is more socially confident, is more aware of the rest of the world, is more able and more adept at research, may not be able to say the 9 times table as fluently or repeat amo amasamata mamasamati amant. They may not be able to do that. Is that such a great loss to an old-fashioned person like me? I'd love to think people could do both. But let's get real about this. Connection is what humans crave. It's what we are all about. It's something that separates us from animals. It even comes before the fact that we have language, because the language is an example of a, if you like, a neural technology we have created to answer this need for connection. We are the social animal par excellence, or by devilry, if you like.
In fact, a survey showed that 77% of the people between the ages of 18 and 24 reach out for their phones whenever they have any free time. And I'm definitely one.
If you go back a little further to the time of Jane Austen, people found the idea of the novel simply horrific. People could not bear the idea of children sitting around reading. People couldn't bear the idea of people sitting around the radio, and then television, and then games, and then computers, and all these things seemed to those who were not brought up in them somehow to diminish, because we're all so proud of our youth. We think our youth and our childhood was somehow, if not perfect, it was, even if it was imperfect, it made us suffer. How dare these children now not suffer the way I did? They should not have this freedom, this access. Or if they do, while I can approve of it, I ought to suggest that it's dangerous, that it's going to go wrong. Nelly. Well, there's a risk-reward ratio here, and for us the reward is so great that whatever the risk is, we try and contain it and understand it at best. But what we don't do is say the risk is too great.
Friends from around the community.
And of course, it's that visibility, though, that's freaking people out, because there's this longevity associated with that. You know, you put something up on, I don't know, you put something up on Facebook, like a social networking site, or you put something on MySpace or any of these spaces, and it's there. It's there for life. So are there ways that the kids are starting to protect themselves? How do they stop what they're putting up there?
Well, they're not going to stop what they put up there, because the trick with online materials is everything is persistent by its nature, right? That's one of the powers of the internet. That moment of transition, that point of absolute confusion, the uncertainty of, you know, what does it mean that you have everything up there? Down the road, it just becomes the way things are, you know, and it's interesting to see the individuals for whom that's already part of their story. And that's the power of the early adopters, right? So it's no longer the Nikes that are the particular status markers, it's the way of actually maintaining certain kinds of friendships and getting certain kinds of, you know, responses from certain celebrities. All of that play goes on. We also see marginalized kids who were desperately seeking some sort of support, you know, and were often at loss, you know, out in more traditional senses of schools or whatnot. finding a community online, and this is one of the more powerful narratives of the internet, right? Your queer kids who can actually find people like them, who can support them. They're much more willing to be public in a traditional sense because they're desperate for somebody who might be like them.
People capturing these moments and having a chance to share them with the world, and people using it as a resource to be informed. And what I think it does, when you see the personal side of people just capturing everyday life, is that it breaks down cultural barriers. In the past, I think people have just kind of consumed their knowledge, or I guess their perception of the world, just through media, which again isn't always unbiased. But when you start seeing everyday life from everyday people on the streets, no matter what country they live in, I think it adds a very personal element to that people can connect with, and they start understanding that they have families, they have feelings, they have dreams, just like I do, and not hearing just the biased stories that they would tune in and see on the news. So in that way, I think that's really what has surprised me throughout this process, beyond just looking for that special formula of what makes a video popular. I love to hear about the powerful examples of how YouTube's been able to just affect culture in general.
Can I move on?
A few.
Yeah, a few. Has what we're calling that kind of generation web? Are they more sophisticated in their understanding of media and kind of viral culture? Do you think do they see the world differently to a generation that probably my generation?
Yeah, I think it's going to be pretty amazing to see how the next generation, I guess, evolves, if you want to call it that, because of their access to technology, but ultimately their access to information. I think education is being redefined. It's not necessarily about memorization. It's about searching for answers. You have an infinite amount of resources available to you, or information available to you. And I think people, or this next generation, I guess, are much more knowledgeable about any topic that you can
what
think.
seems like a virtuous cycle of more and more and more. But as we see what this generation looks like as it grows up with it, they're now a generation in retreat. They'll text, but they won't talk. One of the things that has been so, for somebody like me who does interviews and who believes in what you learn from the face, from, the philosophers tell us that we become human when we're confronted with another face through the voice, through the inflection of the voice. These kids don't want to see a face, they don't want to see a voice. They want to text. So that in a way we're no longer nourished but consumed in some way by what we've created, and it's not all good. I see people in retreat as much as they are in advance now that they have all this information. It starts off.